Hey guys, and welcome back to another Was It Woke video. So today we're going to be discussing Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, and we're going to be running it through my criteria to determine just how woke was it. For those not familiar, my 5 criteria consist of the following. Number 1, racial diversity. Number 2, LGBTQ representation. Number 3, toxic masculinity / feminist messaging. Number 4, traditions bad, progressivism good. And number 5, anti-capitalism / pro-socialism. But before we get started, I want to clear something up because there's been some confusion lately as to exactly what these videos are, these Was It Woke videos. What am I setting out to do? What am I setting out to define exactly? And so I thought what I'll do is I would define wokeness in terms of the entertainment industry and give you my best idea of what I perceive it to be in this day and age. So I define woke as the following. Wokeness in entertainment is the subversion and/or changing of established stories, characters, and law in order to promote a real-world far-left agenda. I wanted to clear that up because I know there's a lot of confusion about this term woke in this day and age. Everyone has different definitions for it. Everyone uses it in different ways. And I think there is some truth to that in the sense that different industries, it works in different ways in different industries, whether you're looking at politics or education or entertainment, sports. It permeates in different ways. So I wanted to clear it up, particularly when it comes to the entertainment industry and how I perceive that wokeness affects it. So without further ado, let's get started. Number 1 is racial diversity. So looking at the cast here for this film, it is a pretty diverse cast in the way of genders and race. But that said, it all feels very natural. You know, you obviously have the Iwi tribe as well in this, so you have like a kind of a native group in this film too. So there's all sorts of diversity going on, but it all feels very natural to the story. None of it feels forced in any sort of way. And so I'm just going to give it a straight up 0 out of 10 for racial diversity. Number 2 is LGBTQ representation. So straight up, there was none in this film whatsoever, but I have to be clear here. Just even if there was LGBTQ representation, that wouldn't inherently make the film woke or woke in that criteria. It would all depend on how it is used and how it is forced into the film. But in this instance, it's not there whatsoever. So I'm just going to give a straight up 0 out of 10 for LGBTQ representation. Number 3 is toxic masculinity / feminist messaging. So starting off here, when we break it down, looking at the males and the females in this film. So the male characters, there is a character, the black guy, who is kind of the comedic relief in this film, the humor where they run all the jokes through, and then you have Dan Stevens' character who's also kind of getting in on the jokes. They both kind of act silly at times, kind of playing off each other. So that's not an inherently bad thing, but when you're reading between the lines and seeing it like kind of greater agendas at play here, you know, they always do this in these films these days where they will give all the kind of silliness to the male characters. Meanwhile, the female characters are always kind of stoic and serious and very, you know, purposeful. Like they're not acting stupid or playing up or anything like that. It's such a common thing these days to see, and it's definitely the case here in this film. Now, that's not a big gripe. It's a very minor gripe, but look, all films kind of do that these days. It's almost becoming the norm. But what can I say? I would love to see a bit more kind of like diversity in this regard, for lack of a better word. You know, I'd love to see kind of females getting in on the silliness, and I'd like to see the males still being silly, but also, you know, contributing like genuine like help and being competent at things. Yes, Dan Stevens' character, he's probably the most competent male in this film, and he was a pretty decent character if you ask me. So look, it's not a major gripe, it's a very minor one, but just has to be said. Regarding toxicity within either gender, you know, there is this one male character, a military guy who gets killed pretty early on. He's kind of pretty toxic in his behavior. He's always being overbearing and he's like shouting at them all, telling them what to do, and then he ends up getting eaten. So like they kind of show you what that kind of person deserves by seeing him getting eaten by this like worm thing. But anyways, that's another minor thing, but it just has to be said that the only real toxic character in this film is a military man. And there's another small thing here that I want to talk about that is kind of an issue, not just in this film, but in many modern films these days. So you kind of have this introduction to Dan Stevens' character, and then obviously the reintroduction of Rebecca Hall's character. They're basically the main male and the main female characters of this film. They kind of present them at the beginning as having some sort of chemistry, some sort of tension, but then it's completely like not like disappears for the rest of the film. It's non-existent whatsoever. So it's like in years past, decades past, you would have had some sort of relationship bonding between them throughout the film, growing there, some sort of like flirtatious, like kind of dynamic going on. Don't have to end up together, but at least some sort of flirting, just some sort of romance to kind of create a bit of a spark between the human characters, but it's completely non-existent. And to me, it speaks to this kind of greater agenda where they're trying to give females more agency that is not dependent on them finding a partner in a male character. That's what I see here. That is, blatant. It's obvious as anything. And yeah, look, they chose instead to focus on the relationship mainly between Rebecca Hall, Eileen, and the young girl, Gia. So they're kind of showing their kind of mother-daughter bond. And look, that's a nice thing in its own. I have no problems with that. I just think you could also have a romantic relationship at the same time. That not only would that create a bit more fun for the film with the human characters, but also create a bit of emotional investment. That would be nice to see. But instead, they're just these two kind of sterile characters who just acknowledge each other's existence, but nothing really more. So there's no development between them whatsoever. And like, I feel like this is a very common thing that's happening in films these days, where they're trying to kind of just separate the male and female genders, not bring them together, instead give the females their own agency by not having them rely on a man whatsoever. So to me, it's stupid, but again, it's another minor thing, and it's just adding on to these bunch of minor things that I saw throughout this film when it comes to the toxic masculinity and feminist messaging. And so with that said, I'm going to give a 5 out of 10 for toxic masculinity / feminist messaging. Number 4 is traditions bad, progressivism good. There's no real reference to either of these in this film. It's kind of a political film in that regard, or really doesn't really reference anything to do with traditions or progressivism. It's just kind of a normal sort of story that happens. It's more about the monsters, which don't really relate at all to tradition or progressivism in any sort of way. So pretty much non-existent. So I'm just going to give a straight up 0 out of 10 for traditions bad, progressivism good. Fifth and final criteria is anti-capitalism / pro-socialism. This is an easy one. There's no reference to either here. We're talking about monsters in this film. There's no reference to monetary systems in any way. So yeah, easy one, 0 out of 10 for anti-capitalism / pro-socialism. So the total of those 5 criteria is 5, all of that coming from the third criteria. We take that 5 and we divide it by the 5 criteria, and that equals 1, which is firmly not woke. I wasn't surprised at all by this outcome. You look at the previous Monsterverse films, they have not dealt with wokeness at all. If at all, it's just been tiny bits, but nothing really at all. They're pretty just straight up like action, blockbuster monster flicks, so nothing else to them than that. Not much substance really to them either. But yeah, so they are pretty clear of wokeness. So if you're worried about these kind of films, or this film being woke in any way, you have nothing to worry about. There's nothing really there at all, just some minor gripes as I mentioned earlier. But other than that, it's pretty safe. So yeah, Godzilla vs. Kong, The New Empire is not woke. Thanks for watching this video, guys. I really appreciate it. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Did you see wokeness in this film that I didn't see? If so, I'd love to hear it all. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.